CGI might be great for giant dragons and hordes of faceless robots and aliens, but for over 100 years of film, nothing beats a little latex and spirit gum. Crazy features on aliens and superhero aliens and such are an easy thing to do when sitting in the Marvel bullpen creating the world of Marvel Comics.
What an amazing adventure!
But for the cinematic universe, you need to make regular humans look like crazy, no-way creatures. There's no avoiding it. That means that the actors are gonna have to spend some time in the chair.
And action!
Now, Josh Brolin has the distinction of double dipping when it comes to Marvel on the big screen. Computers did a lot of the heavy lifting to create the Mad Titan Thanos, but for the future war veteran in the past, Cable, he got his gritty look the old-fashioned way, by gluing stuff to his face.
Really? Well, good for you.
Now, naturally, Brolin needs his head and face for doing head and face stuff, so in order to have a head to build the prosthetics for, the effects team needed to create a mold of his head. While downing hot wings on the YouTube series Hot Ones, Brolin talked about the uncomfortable nature of the process. With only straws acting as a snorkel, his eyes, ears, and mouth are covered. That means that you can't hear or see anything, and as it tightens around your head, you can't say anything. To keep the demons at bay in that situation, Brolin keeps a notepad and pen to alert the crew when he might start to feel anxious and needs help calming down. Thanks to the epic finale of the Spider-Man Home movies, there are now a select few who have played the same character in two different franchises. Alfred Molina's portrayal of Dr. Otto Octavius, or Dr. Octopus, goes all the way back to the second Sam Raimi Spider-Man and has remained one of the best superhero villains on the big screen. Released in 2004, director Sam Raimi preferred as many practical effects as possible. The result was Alfred and as many as 16 puppeteers under puppet master Eric Hayden operating the legs and moving in harmony with Molina. For 2021's return of Doc Ock, times have changed, even if in the narrative. CGI took over the legwork, punny, and to create the illusion that he was being moved around by said legs, he was put on a balanced crane so that he could be moved around easily. Just not by him. Tom Holland, during an interview on Hot Ones, joked that he'd be in the middle of a conversation with Molina and he'd suddenly float off to be positioned for the next shot. But Molina's Doc Ock didn't come alone when he crossed over to Earth 199, all the nines, just all of them. He also brought his Peter, Tobey Maguire. Just like Brolin, the costume department needed a Tobey Maguire they could dress up without having the actual Tobey Maguire lounging around the shop. They needed more than just a head. They needed the full Tobey. Maguire was eager to comply. So eager, in fact, that he didn't mention his claustrophobia that was triggered during the making of the mold. Given all that, you might think that he'd be reluctant to don the suit again, but in a roundtable with the three Peters, Maguire said that once you get over the goofiness of being in a lycra and spandex suit, he started to enjoy it, feeling grateful to play a character he enjoys and means so much to people. Rounding out the gathering of the Spider-Man and friends was Amazing Spider-Man 2's main baddie, Jamie Foxx's Electro. In fact, it was Jamie Foxx sharing art that had 3 Spider-Men on it that kickstarted the ultimately correct speculation that there would be a coming together of Spider-Man. Now, while Garfield has created a renaissance for his portrayal of Peter Parker by being both charming and adorable in No Way Home, Amazing Spider-Man 2 still doesn't top a lot of lists for favorite Spider-Man movies. Now, one of the marks against it is the Ultimates-inspired glowing blue look of Electro, which involved blue body paint, prosthetics, and glowing contact lenses with lighting built into the hood of his shirt. Foxx's only request to return was that he not be blue, but the bit of makeup that bothered him the most was the goofy hair for his nerdy alter ego Max Dillon. Now, unless your name is Peter Parker, the MCU hasn't been all that particular when it comes to secret identities. Not since Tony Stark revealed himself as Iron Man at a press conference. Likewise, leaks, set photos, even actors' travel schedules have meant that secrets are hard to keep, no matter how hard Andrew Garfield tried. So when you really need to do a secret bad guy reveal, it takes a few extra steps. Olga Kurylenko portrayed Antonia Dreykov, who Natasha thought she had killed in an attempt to assassinate Antonia's father in the long-awaited Black Widow movie. Well, being comics, neither death took. For the reveal, Kurylenko was put in the hot and heavy Taskmaster suit, which also restricted her movement. The extra step was something out of The Masked Singer. She'd be brought onto set in full regalia, and when not shooting, she'd go under an umbrella that had a special curtain hanging around it. It was successful, since going into the movie, most people assumed O.T. Fagbenly was going to be the Taskmaster. It worked. Even Kurylenko's mom didn't know, and invited her daughter out to see that new Black Widow movie that looked so interesting. Despite emerging as the funniest Avenger, Thor has been through a lot. That would take a toll on anyone, even someone as mighty as Thor, and that manifests in what some have dubbed as Dude Thor. Superhero training regiments are notorious for their grueling workouts.
Look, I don't have time for this.
But instead of going the opposite direction and living off of burritos and pizza burritos, I think those are called calzones, the normally chiseled Hemsworth was given a fat suit. For the shirt-off scenes, the prosthetic weighed close to 90 pounds. With the extra bulk and the battle armor, Hemsworth said that it was the hottest he's ever felt. He did note, however, that being in the suit meant that the cast often wanted to cuddle him. There are probably a lot of people who would very much like to cuddle Chris Hemsworth in or out of the prosthetic, really. Speaking of Thor's big sis, her look provided some unique challenges. Just to start, there's that enormous antler setup when she goes into battle, and the shifting organic shapes of her necro swords. That's kind of a redundant name, right? Necro is a prefix meaning related to death. Death sword. Is there someone out there making friendship swords? Can I have one? Anyway, Hela was supposed to have an alien look about her. Generally speaking, the shortest distance to that goal is through a computer. But that would mean they'd have Blanchett in the gray motion capture suit covered with ping pong balls for tracking. Not wanting to lose some of that real-world textured detail work from the art department, they put practical effects chocolate in practical effects peanut butter. A custom tracking suit was made that had key elements of Hela's costume design with now far more subtle tracking points so that it wouldn't lose the feel of Hela on set. Disney Plus's first brand new headlining character has finally made his debut in the series Moon Knight. Oscar Isaac plays the vengeful Fist of Khonshu, who suffers from dissociative identity disorder, with Mark Spector and Stephen Grant both laying claim to the same body. And Jake Lockley, probably. This is written between episodes 4 and 5. And on top of all that, being the avatar of the rather pushy Khonshu. Since Moon Knight's armor is of the mystic variety, it hasn't been as bulky as others, with Isaac complementing the craftsmanship of those who made it. Since Moon Knight is a complicated character, there's also an alternate version of Moon Knight dubbed Mr. Knight, who wears a formal suit and white mask with a personality that Isaac was able to build, making him the actor's favorite. Now, if he seems a little extra delighted at Moon Knight's costume, it's because Isaac is another actor who has played in 2 different Marvel franchises. His first turn was as the menacing mutant Apocalypse. For that, he had to don 45 pounds of suit plus prosthetic attachments and blue paint. With all that on, he couldn't move his head, and often couldn't see the actors he was working with.
Is it all worth it?
It is when it works.
Isaac was also on risers to make him taller. In order to sit down, a special saddle was made. When the camera stopped rolling, he would sit on the saddle that would then be moved to a cooling tent, so he couldn't even interact with the ensemble cast between takes. But he said the worst part was taking it off, because the only way to do that was to scrape it off for hours. So, wearing a white suit and mask really is a trade-up. Not many superheroes get to peacefully retire. It looks like even 1,500-year-old Thor isn't going to get away with it. But Steve Rogers was able to hang up his Captain America helmet and use his skipping through time and space to go to get that dance that he was denied when he became a capsicle. Now, while computers had been used in de-aging characters like Nick Fury, Agent Coulson, and even Michael Douglas's Hank Pym, going up was a combination of computers and old-fashioned prosthetics. Evans shared a picture of himself halfway through the aging process that showed how digital effects helped take Cap those extra years. Hugo Weaving was menacing enough as a bad guy in The Matrix that when they wanted to ramp it up, they just made more Hugo Weavings. He was also a natural to play Captain America's quintessential villain, the Red Skull. The character of Herr Schmidt wore a Hugo Weaving face for most of the movie before finally tearing it off to reveal the iconic head of Marvel's first master villain. At first, artists Charlie Wen and Ryan Meinerding tried for an anatomic skull, but the comic's original design ended up being the best model. The process took 3 hours, from wrapping and powdering the head to applying the prosthetics. For a little extra menace, a set of bottom teeth were added. The final product got a digital touch to remove any folds or wrinkles, and of course, to remove Weaving's nose. Speaking of characters with messed up faces and associated with the color red, Deadpool!
Oh, hello.
I'm a master of transitions. Like the Chris's, Evans, Hemsworth, and Pratt, the Ryans, Gosling, and Reynolds are known by their good looks as much as their acting heft. But Reynolds, above all, is known for his rapid patter, making him a perfect Deadpool, as long as they don't seal his mouth for some reason. But Deadpool's face bears the scars of the questionable project he undertook to trigger mutant abilities. That means under the mask was a gruesome visage and ripe improv material between Reynolds and TJ Miller. For the naked fight with Ajax, Reynolds had to wear a full-body prosthetic. With makeup and prosthetics taking hours, Reynolds took his life into his own hands by pranking his team, pulling half of the prosthetic face off just as they finished. Actor Paul Betteny tends to make sure that it's clear that he loves his job and doesn't really have any complaints. After all, as he said in interviews, he got the call to be Jarvis while leaving the office of someone who had just told him he'd never work in the industry again. So when he was asked about his vision makeup, he said that the process of putting it on wasn't very interesting. Getting it off, however, was its own whole ordeal. The process ends up taking a toll on his skin, which is livable if you're not in most of the project, but for WandaVision, it was a daily thing. So, to help lighten the damage from removal, they built a special kind of head sauna to help hasten and ease the prosthetic removal process. Whether he's overseeing the design of the Death Star, underestimating his criminal enterprise with Bane, or infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D. as a shape-shifting alien whose people have been in a millennium-long war with the Kree, actor Ben Mendelsohn has a unique presence, even when hiding under the green prosthetic mask of a Skrull in his natural form. Fun note, Talos the Untamed in the comics is actually one of the only Skrulls that can't shapeshift. It was Mendelsohn's first time under prosthetics, which he felt was a little restricting, but also felt that the pig head, as he describes it, did a lot of the work of being menacing and strange for him. Now, while the main villain of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was Peter's dad, Ego the Living Planet, the Guardians aren't exactly great at making friends. They already had Yondu's Ravagers after them, but Rocket's sticky fingers got the self-consciously perfect Sovereign to release the full might of their arcade-controlled armada. Depicting the statuesque leader of the Sovereign, Aisha, was Elisabeth Delicki, who had to undergo the full Shirley Eaton. Shirley Eaton was the model who was painted gold in the James Bond movie Goldfinger. People think she died because of that, despite her still being alive. After the gold paint was applied, she donned the mostly metal gold-colored dress they referred to as the Aisha Taco. If the heavy dress that she said felt like a child hanging off of her back wasn't enough, she was also wearing shoes with so much lift they almost qualify as stilts, bringing her height up to around 9 feet. With Aisha's gold treatment only taking around an hour and a half, she had nothing on Dave Bautista's Drax, who had the longest time getting transformed into Drax than any of the other Guardians. Well, one is human and 2 more are all CGI, so it was really just a race between him, Gamora, and Nebula. The 5-hour process started with a vacuum form of Bautista's substantial torso, with all 16 pieces laid out in it with connecting points marked. Medical adhesive holds all the pieces together. Then, attention is paid to the tattoo designs with red and green highlights. Finally, the whole thing was sprayed with a sealant to endure a day of shooting. The team was able to shave the 5-hour prep time down to a record time of just below 3 hours, but there was still an hour and a half dedicated to taking it all off again. One of 8 former Doctor Who cast members to find their way to a superhero franchise of one kind or another, Karen Gillan's prosthetic application was the second longest at 4 hours and 15 minutes. This included the 5 separate pieces that were joined and blended once on the actor. Gillian wasn't precious about the process either. Despite being known for her red hair, she showed the attendees in Hall H at Comic-Con her shaved head to create a mold of it to design the prosthetics. The most painful sounding aspect, though, is the 22mm contact lenses. No wonder she kept crashing her ship into people as her opening move. Compared to what Bautista and Gillian were going through, it turns out it was easy being green for Zoe Saldana. The most difficult part of her makeup was finding just the right shades of green to complement the character. Joining for the second outing, Mantis actor Palm Clementif had it the easiest. Different designs were tried, including visible veins, but in the end she just wore prosthetic stalks that formed the base of her antenna, leaving the rest to CGI. At first glance, Black Panther antagonist Killmonger seemed to be doing just fine without prosthetics, still managing to be one of the best antagonists in the MCU. But but he wasn't able to escape the chair completely. When he steps up to challenge the claim for king of the most technologically advanced nation on the planet via ritual combat, he takes off his shirt to reveal that he is covered in ritual scars, one for each kill he's made as a mercenary. And there's a lot. I mean, he did earn the name Killmonger. All of those prosthetics had to be applied individually and then sealed because they had to survive an epic fight above a waterfall. The amount of adhesive and sealant meant that he had to spend time in a sauna in order to take off the fake wounds. Long before there was ever an MCU, there were actors getting the full-body paint treatment. The first to portray the shapeshifter Mystique was Rebecca Romijn, who was covered head to toe in blue paint and some strategically placed scales. In the comics, Mystique wears a white dress with a cool skull belt, but for the movies, she was au naturel. For an answer why, ask Laura Mulvey. The process took 9 hours, shortened over the course of the franchise, which was a relief since she spent all of 3 minutes in X-Men 3. Jennifer Lawrence's body makeup process was trimmed down to a brisk 7 hours, with Lawrence concerned most about the chemical smell from the makeup.
And cut!
The one who has it the worst in these heavy makeup characters is the poor production assistant who gets sent by the assistant director to check on the process every 30 minutes until they're both grumpy, and the poor PA is like a kid relaying messages between parents about to divorce.
But why subject me to this exercise in terror?